Hello, my name is Severin. On the morning of the biggest deal of my life, $300 million, I thought my biggest fear was walking into that boardroom late. I was wrong. My car broke down. I took a taxi. And in the back seat of that taxi, a stranger spoke one sentence that quietly dismantled my marriage, my career, and the family I thought I had built. She said she used to work for my company. She said she was fired for seeing something she wasn't supposed to see. My wife, another man, a rose tattoo on his neck. In that moment, I wasn't angry yet. I couldn't be. I was too busy trying to breathe, realizing that the people closest to me hadn't just lied. They had planned. And the worst part, that was only the beginning of what they took from me. The morning I was supposed to become untouchable, I woke up before my alarm. My eyes were open, but my body refused to move. The ceiling of our penthouse stared back like it was daring me to blink first. I sat up slowly, trying not to wake Lyra, who was turned away from me, one arm hanging off the bed like a mannequin frozen mid-reach. It was 4:47 a.m. I had rehearsed this day in my head for a decade. The acquisition would be finalized by noon, and with that, my stake in Zurin Holdings would place me permanently among the elite. Not the fake kind who inherited everything. I had built this. I had bled for this. In the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted my cufflinks. They were my father's, gold, understated, the kind of thing that whispered legacy instead of shouting it. My tie was already knotted, but I undid it and did it again, because I could feel my hands needing something to do. On the dresser, tucked just under my watch, was a card. The edges were soft now. I'd carried it from place to place for years without ever throwing it out. "Stay strong," my mother had written in blue ink, the kind that always seemed to smudge no matter how careful she was. I slipped the card into my coat pocket. By 5:22, I was downstairs. Marvin, my driver, stood beside the Maybach, scratching the back of his head like a kid who'd broken something. "Mr. Avenhart, sir. I don't know how this happened. Fuel system's acting up. Thing won't turn over." I just looked at him. Not angry. Just disappointed in the kind of way that makes people apologize more. "I can call a taxi right away," he added, fumbling for his phone. "I'll make sure it's here in less than 5. "No choice, is there?" I muttered. Marvin called. I kept glancing at my watch. Every second felt like someone scraping a fork across porcelain. This wasn't how today was supposed to start. When the cab pulled up, it was a silver Toyota. Nothing fancy, but clean. The driver, a woman in her late 30s maybe, had tied back curls and a red scarf. She gave a quick nod when she saw me. "Severin Avenhart." I nodded, got in. We pulled into traffic. The city outside was still half asleep. Buildings were just beginning to flicker with light. A bagel cart rolled down the sidewalk, steam trailing behind it like breath on a cold day. After a few blocks, the silence in the cab started to feel heavy. I was reviewing figures in my head, line by line, until she spoke. "You're with Zurin Holdings, right?" she asked, eyes never leaving the road. My body stiffened. "Yeah, why?" "I used to work there," she said. "A while back, in HR. Small world, I thought." I kept it to a polite, disinterested, "Oh?" She hesitated. "I got fired after I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Nothing illegal, just messy." Now she had my attention. "Messy how?" I asked. There was a car, black, like this one. I was waiting in the garage, and one of the exec's wives was in the back seat, with a man, not her husband. There was kissing. A lot of it. I didn't move. Didn't get a clear look at him, she said. But I saw something. A tattoo. Left side of the neck. A rose. That was the moment the floor of my chest gave out. I remembered a night 2 years ago. Lyra came home late. Her perfume was stronger than usual, and there was a faint whiff of cologne beneath it. Something spicy, not mine. I asked. She said it was a coworker's jacket she borrowed when it got cold. I didn't press. Why would I? But now, that old smell came flooding back, like smoke you didn't notice until it filled the room. I didn't speak, just watched the skyline glide past, buildings slicing through the fog like truths I couldn't unhear. She glanced at me through the mirror. Sorry, she said quietly. I thought you should know. I've kept that to myself for a long time. Just felt right to say it today. My tie felt like it was tightening on its own. My palms were slick. I nodded once, didn't trust myself to speak. When we pulled up to the building, I tipped her and stepped out. My legs didn't feel like mine. The doorman greeted me by name, but I barely heard it. Inside the elevator, I stared at myself. Same face, same suit, same man who thought he knew how today would go. But I wasn't that man anymore. I stepped into the room I had built from the ground up, and my name was missing from the opening slide. I didn't notice it right away. At first, it was the stillness that hit me. Everyone was already seated, rows of suits and tailored dresses lining the long oval table, laptops open, pens in hand. I was 12 minutes late, but it wasn't the kind of late that made people fidget. It was the kind that made them shift. The air felt too still, controlled, like someone had vacuumed out the sound just before I walked in. Adric, my older brother and our acting CEO, glanced up from his seat at the head of the table. He gave me a nod, not a greeting, just an acknowledgement that I'd finally arrived. "Morning, Sev," he said flatly. No warmth, no room saved beside him. I walked to the far end of the table and sat down in the only remaining chair, just a seat away from the assistants. As I pulled out my notes, the lights dimmed, a projector flicked on. The first slide appeared. Visionary Growth Partners, Legacy Leaders. Beneath the title were 3 high-resolution portraits: Adric, Lyra, Chairman Furson, no me. I blinked. At first, I thought maybe this was just the introductory frame. Maybe they were rolling out visuals first and names after. But then came the second slide, Founding Force, with bullet points about the origins of the company. And there it was again. Their faces, their names, their bios, their quotes. And I was nowhere. To my right, a young exec, Tanner, I think, gave a sideways glance, the kind you try to hide but can't. Across the table, one of our longtime investors leaned in to whisper, "I thought Severin was one of the founders." "I did too," the other murmured. I didn't look up. My eyes stayed fixed on the edge of the table, the smooth, polished wood reflecting tiny pinpoints of ceiling light. My hands were resting flat beside my notebook, and I realized, too late, that they were trembling. Adric was in full pitch mode now, confident, articulate, talking about market capture, forward strategy, public image. Every slide turned like a page in a script he had written alone. My name never appeared. Even when the core development team slide came up, the very codebase I built, line by line, during those first impossible winters in that drafty converted warehouse, he skipped past it. I could still remember those nights, Lyra bringing me coffee at 2:14 a.m., sitting beside me with a blanket around her shoulders while I debugged our payment system. She used to rub my back with one hand and whisper, "This will be worth it. You're building something no one can take." Except they were taking it, not violently, not all at once, just quietly, slide by slide, word by word. During the Q&A, an investor stood and asked a question about projected returns post-acquisition. It was in my wheelhouse. I leaned in, cleared my throat, and answered carefully. Based on the Q3 trajectory, Adric cut me off. "Actually, Lyra can speak to that," he said with a half smile. "She's been leading that model with finance." "Lie?" She didn't even glance at me, just nodded and started answering like that was always the plan, like I hadn't opened my mouth at all. Another investor raised a hand. "Sorry, what's your name again?" he asked me. "Sam, right?" I opened my mouth, but before I could say a word, Lyra replied for me. "That's Severin," she said, still smiling, but the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. No apology, no correction, just an adjustment, like fixing a typo. The meeting continued. I stopped taking notes. My pen sat idle. My body was present, but everything else inside me was already backing out of that room. Somewhere between the next slides, charts, figures, growth projections, I stopped hearing them. My eyes drifted beyond the table to the far wall where the glass reflected the room back at us. I saw myself sitting there. Same suit, same hair, same eyes I saw in the elevator mirror 30 minutes ago. But the man I saw now looked smaller, like he was already fading from the frame. And a voice inside me whispered something I had never allowed myself to think before. What if they've already decided I don't exist? The question stayed with me long after the boardroom emptied. What if they had already decided I didn't exist? I carried it home like a weight lodged behind my ribs. The drive back was uneventful, yet every red light felt longer than it should have. By the time I stepped into my condo, the city had fully woken up. I loosened my tie, set my keys on the entry table, and stood there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet hum of a space that no longer felt like refuge. Sleep didn't come. I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while fragments from the day replayed out of order. The slide without my name, Lyra's practiced smile, Adric's voice cutting across mine as if I were a distraction. I checked my phone, then checked it again, not sure what I was waiting for. Sometime after midnight, I moved to my desk. The light from the monitor washed the room in a pale glow as I typed Vera's name into an old internal database I still had access to. Her HR record surfaced quickly. Terminated. Cause listed as breach of professional conduct. No details. No follow-up. Clean. Too clean. I remembered a meeting years ago, an emergency one, where a minor incident in the garage had been discussed and dismissed. We had been warned about optics, about discretion, about keeping the brand intact. I had agreed, thinking it was about protecting the company. I hadn't asked who paid the price. At 3:17 a.m., my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I let it ring once, then answered. "This is Severin." Her voice came through steady, careful. "I didn't know if you'd pick up. I'm glad you did." I didn't ask how she got my number. "I don't know what kind of man you are," Vera continued, "but I think you deserve to know the truth. I kept a copy of the dash cam." There was a pause. I heard traffic somewhere behind her, distant and restless. "I'm sending you a file," she said. "It's encrypted. The password is the date I was fired." The call ended. A second later, An email arrived with an attachment and a brief note. No explanations, just the file. I unlocked it. The video opened without ceremony. The footage was grainy, slightly tilted. The inside of a car at night. Streetlights sliding across leather seats. Then Lyra's laugh. Light, familiar, the laugh she used when she wanted something. A man leaned into frame. Dark hair. Confident posture, and there, unmistakable against his skin, a rose tattoo on the left side of his neck. He kissed her. She didn't pull away. Off camera, Vera's voice drifted in, polite and professional. "Ma'am, we're almost there." Lyra laughed again. "Just go around the block a few times. We're not done yet." I paused the video. My hand tightened around the mouse until it creaked. I played that line again. Not done yet. I remembered the night. I had been at an awards dinner, standing under bright lights, thanking my team and talking about loyalty, about building something that would last. Lyra had texted to say she was out with friends. I watched the rest in silence. No shouting, no confrontation, just proof. Preserved exactly as it happened. When the video ended, the room felt smaller. I closed the laptop and sat back, breathing through the heaviness settling in my chest. There was no explosion of anger, no dramatic collapse, just a steady, creeping understanding. They hadn't just erased me from a slide. They had rewritten the story while I was still living inside it. I stood, walked to the cabinet, and retrieved a secure drive I kept for sensitive work files. I transferred the video carefully, labeled the folder, and added a single note inside. If I forget who they really are, play this. I shut the cabinet and leaned against it, letting the cool surface ground me. Outside, the city continued as it always did. Sirens in the distance, a train rumbling underground. I realized then that whatever came next wouldn't be loud. It would be deliberate. The last time I walked into Adric's brownstone, it had been draped in mourning. Same hall, same scent of lemon polish and money. Back then, we'd gathered to bury our father. Now we were here to bury something quieter. My presence, my contribution, maybe even my name. I arrived precisely at 7. No valet, no welcome. Just the faint sound of laughter behind the door before it opened to reveal Lyra. She stood there in a silky ivory blouse, hair tucked effortlessly behind one ear, like she hadn't shattered my reality just hours ago. Her eyes scanned me quickly, noting the absence of my ring, the open collar. "You look relaxed," she said. I gave her nothing in return. Not even a nod. Inside, the dining room shimmered with warm lighting and curated cheer. Adric was already seated at the head of the table, glass of red wine in hand, mid-sentence. Bryn, their daughter, my niece, scrolled through her phone with one AirPod in, oblivious to the generational theater playing out around her. Chairman Furson and 2 junior execs I barely recognized offered polite smiles as I entered. One of them, Jason, maybe, started to stand, then hesitated and sat back down, like he wasn't sure I still outranked him. I pulled out the only empty chair. It hadn't been saved. Just left. Dinner began like it was any other celebratory night. Toasts. Polite banter, something about market positioning and international expansion. I cut through a seared lamb chop, nodding absently, letting my mind drift to the dashcam drive, now sitting in a locked drawer back at my condo. I imagined it glowing, pulsing, waiting. When dessert arrived, some over-decorated brulee I didn't touch, Lyra stood. She held her glass up, the room falling into hush like she'd rehearsed the moment 100 times. To family, she said, to future, and to finally clarifying our roles. Adric smirked into his wine glass. Bryn didn't look up. Lyra turned to a console near the fireplace and tapped a remote. A screen descended slowly, humming as if it were giving me time to leave. I didn't. The first slide bloomed across the screen. A chart. Clean lines, modern fonts. At the top, Adric Vaughn, Executive Chair. Below him, Lyra Vaughn, Chief Vision and Strategy Officer. And under her, various departments reorganized into verticals. My name wasn't on it, not in any role, not in any corner box labeled Advisor or Founding Partner Emeritus. Nothing. Like I'd never existed. I didn't move. Of course, Lyra continued, change can feel abrupt, especially in legacy structures. But this is about alignment, forward movement, clarity. Clarity. She clicked again. Another slide. A screenshot of the new app interface appeared. The framework, navigation, data layering, even the security structure, was mine. I knew it like I knew the scar on my left hand. I'd built the prototype during nights everyone else was sleeping, back when this company was just an idea in a warehouse with faulty heat. But on the screen, stamped in soft gray font under the logo, read the words, Lyra Vaughn, Vision in Motion. No mention of me. Not even in the metadata. I knew because I leaned in and looked. And there it was. My back-end code signature stripped, replaced. They hadn't just erased me. They'd rewritten me. Silence clung to the room like condensation. The chairman cleared his throat. Someone shifted their fork. And then Lyra spoke again. Severin, she said sweetly, we've arranged a package. Retirement, but with dignity. You'll have a consulting title. We'd still love for you to lend your name. If that helps the ego, of course. I slowly turned my head toward her. I built that architecture. Her expression didn't change. We all build something, Sev. But the future belongs to those who evolve. Adric added, no one's pushing you out. We're just pivoting. Let's be civilized, Lyra repeated. You deserve peace. I reached for my water, took a sip, set it down. Then I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my plate. As polite applause started to ripple through the table, I leaned in, just enough so she'd hear me clearly. Don't mistake my silence, I whispered, for surrender. The applause faded behind me like a door quietly closing on an old version of myself. I didn't turn back. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of that brownstone into the crisp night air, my hands in my coat pockets and my pulse ringing in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, not yet, but I knew who I was calling. Vera picked up on the second ring. I figured you'd call, she said, no pleasantries. You're not the first they've buried alive. I need to see you, I said. Tonight. There was a pause, a sigh. There's a diner in Queens, corner of 89th and Lefferts. I'll be there in 40. She hung up. I took the subway. Anonymity suited me just fine at this hour. When I stepped into the diner, it was half empty, with a hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug. Vera sat in a corner booth, a weathered coat draped over the seat beside her. In front of her was a slice of untouched apple pie and a manila folder, thick and sealed. She slid the folder across the table before I even sat down. I didn't give you everything that night, she said. Some things. I held back. I nodded, sitting across from her. She looked tired, but not weak. Just someone who had lived through more betrayals than she'd wanted to admit. They didn't fire me just because of what I saw, she said. I reported a discrepancy in expense accounts, Adric's signature approving charges that didn't add up. That's when HR pulled out the dash cam footage. Suddenly, I was the problem. She handed me a flash drive. "This is your signature," she said, tapping the folder, "on a legal document authorizing a transfer of your internal IP rights to Executive Committee discretion." I never signed that. "I know," she said. "The timestamp? 14 months ago. You were in post-op recovery. You weren't even logging into the system then." I felt something in my stomach tighten. 14 months ago, I was recovering from surgery. The medication had made me foggy. I remembered trusting Lyra with my home office, letting her manage my calendar, clear out old files. I even gave her my desk passcode so she could print boarding passes before a trip to Montreal. They waited, I muttered, until I couldn't fight back. Vera didn't respond. She didn't need to. I stared at the folder, then down at my hands. I had once built a company from a couch with a cracked laptop and too much caffeine. Now I was being handed proof that everything I built had been neatly siphoned out of my name, buried beneath signatures I'd never touched. I thanked Vera. I paid for her pie, even though she never touched it. She left first. Back at my condo, the silence hit differently. It didn't hum like it used to. It echoed. I tossed my keys onto the counter and turned to find someone standing in my living room. My mother. She held a cardboard box, small, taped twice over. Her coat was still buttoned, her hands steady. "You left this at the house," she said. 10 years ago. Maybe it's time you opened it." She placed the box on the coffee table. Then she turned and left. No hug, no, "I'm proud of you." Just the box and the silence. I sat for a while before I touched it. When I finally pulled the tape free, the smell hit me first. Dust, old books, the faintest trace of my childhood room. Inside were things I had long forgotten. A matchbox car, a faded drawing of a treehouse I never built, and a handmade tie I gave my father one Father's Day, and at the very bottom, a card, a birthday card. The front was drawn in colored pencil, my handwriting, age 7. On the inside, in blue crayon, it read, "I love you." That sentence had a single line drawn through it. Underneath, in different handwriting, my mother's, shaky and small, "Stay strong." I sat there for what felt like hours, card in hand. I remembered that birthday, the way my father looked at me, tight-jawed, unmoved. Later that night, he told me, "Men don't say, 'I love you' out loud. They show it." I had cried. My mother had comforted me, then quietly changed the card. Now, decades later, that little edit held more weight than anything spoken across boardroom tables or printed on glossy slides. The door clicked open behind me. My mother hadn't left the building. She stepped back inside, this time without her coat. "He made me cross it out," she said softly. "Said boys shouldn't hear that too often." I looked up at her. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just sat there, letting the silence speak for itself. She left quietly, the way mothers often do when they've said something that sat inside them for years. The door closed behind her with a gentle click, and I was alone again, with a card that once said, "I love you," and now said, "Stay strong." So I did. I spent the rest of the night in motion. I packed a small bag, took only what mattered: the drive Vera gave me, the forged form, the birthday card. I left everything else behind: my condo, my name on the door, the things I once thought made me who I was. By morning, I was checked into a hotel in Brooklyn under an alias I hadn't used in over a decade. No one knew where I was. That was the point. The suite overlooked a quiet alley. Not the kind of view I was used to, but it came with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. I powered up my laptop, connected to the encrypted drive, created a folder labeled "The Truth" for distribution only if I disappear. I wrote those exact words in the description. I didn't trust coincidences anymore, just facts and backups. Then I called Diane Mercer. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. She used to handle contract structuring for us before she took a sabbatical to care for her husband. She owed me a favor. I never expected I'd cash it in like this. When she arrived, she brought coffee and a guarded expression. I figured this was serious, she said, setting down her briefcase. You don't do small talk at 8 a.m. We got to work. Line by line, we reviewed everything. Timestamps from the internal IP transfer, the forgery Vera flagged, HR memos I dug up from old archives, and 2 property clause amendments that had been inserted without board approval. But one file stopped everything. My resignation letter. It was dated 2 weeks ago, addressed to the board, signed with my name in perfect digital font alignment. I didn't write this, I said, staring at the screen. I believe you, Diane replied. But it was already uploaded to the system, time-stamped. Legally, unless you can prove otherwise, it looks clean. I sat back, trying to control the rising pressure in my chest. They planned every inch of this. Diane looked at me, her voice calm but sharp. You need to get ahead of it. Fast. Right then, a notification pinged on my screen. A forwarded email from Malik, an intern I'd mentored 3 summers ago. He had always been loyal, always eager to learn. The subject line made my stomach clench. Internal transition briefing. Effective Severin Vaughn exit strategy. Scheduled for 2 p.m. that afternoon in the main boardroom. Strategic co-leads, Lyra Vaughn, Adric Vaughn. I closed my laptop. It was time. By 1:40, I was standing outside Zurin Holdings again. Not with press, not with security. Just me, and a drive in my pocket. I didn't take the front elevator. I knew the back access from years ago when the building was still half renovated and I used to fix my own servers. I walked through halls that once smelled like ambition and cheap paint. Now they smelled like bleach and betrayal. The boardroom was already set when I entered, quiet, staged, a few attendees chatting idly. No one noticed me at first. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the main conference monitor, plugged in the USB, and queued up one slide. White text, black background. This is the truth, someone noticed. Then silence rippled across the room like a dropped glass. The screen lit up. First, a voice recording, Vera's, clear, firm, time-stamped. I was told to sign off on the expense fraud. When I didn't, they threatened to fine something. Days later, the dash cam footage surfaced. They used that to push me out. Next, the forged IP transfer, side by side with the real version I'd recovered from old archives. The differences were subtle, but they were there. Fonts, sequence of logins, user IDs. Then the final blow. A screen recording of Lyra logging into my private drive, taken from the company's own admin system. The date? 14 months ago. The night I was under sedation post-surgery. The same day the forged signature appeared. No one spoke. No one moved. I looked around the room. Faces pale. One junior partner mouthed something like, "Holy hell," but no one said it out loud. Adric walked in seconds later, late but smug, until he saw the screen. He froze. As I passed him on my way out, he didn't look at me, but he muttered, low enough that only I could hear it. "You just nuked our family's name." I paused, just long enough to feel the weight of everything he wasn't saying. Then I turned to him. "No," I said. "You did that the day you erased mine." Adric didn't follow me out of the boardroom. Neither did Lyra. The doors shut behind me like a vault, sealing off everything I used to be part of. Outside, the city was unchanged. Honking cars, coffee carts steaming, strangers rushing toward whatever version of purpose they believed in. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I had set the tone. I had pressed play. I returned to my hotel in Brooklyn just after midnight. I didn't turn on the lights, just kicked off my shoes and lay down on the couch, still fully dressed. For the first time in months, my body allowed sleep to take over. It wasn't peace. It wasn't joy. But it was rest. The kind that only comes after you stop pretending things might go back to how they were. I woke late. Slanting sunlight cut through the blinds, warming the carpet. For a second, there was stillness. Then my phone buzzed once, then again. Then it didn't stop. I sat up. 93 unread messages, 14 missed calls, 4 voicemails. My chest tightened. I hadn't felt panic, not real, rising, cold stomach panic, in years. But it came now. I opened my email. The subject line hit me like a brick. Former executive accused of sabotaging $300 million merger in personal vendetta. The article was from a startup tech outlet I recognized, one notoriously cozy with Zurin Holdings, the kind of site that published glossy leadership profiles, puff pieces with innovation in the title, and insider leaks when it served the right people. There it was, my name, bolded in the first line. A smiling photo of me from a charity event 2 years ago, glass of wine in hand, looking oblivious. They painted me as volatile. Once a visionary, now a liability. They quoted unnamed sources claiming I had become unstable, jealous of Lyra's strategic evolution, said I'd gone rogue, leaked confidential files, and endangered the deal with my emotional recklessness. Emotional recklessness. That's what they called the truth now. I opened my company account, locked, access denied, my cloud files frozen, professional email disabled. By noon, my name had been quietly scrubbed from our internal team directories, LinkedIn bios of colleagues, and the company's leadership page. My role? Erased. Again, there was no need to confirm who had orchestrated it, the timing, the tone, the smear campaign. It had Lyra's signature written all over it. She'd always preferred elegance in her executions. The voicemail came in at 12:43 p.m. It was from her. Her voice was calm, steady, not triumphant, not remorseful, just chillingly certain. "This is bigger than you, Severin. Stop now, or I promise you'll lose more than a company." She ended with something that sounded almost like regret, but it wasn't. I stared at the screen, her name glowing, as if it hadn't been burned into my life already. I didn't call back. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. Instead, I got dressed, jeans, jacket, nothing flashy. Walked out of the hotel and made my way to the Hudson. It wasn't far. The wind off the water was brisk. People jogged past me, headphones in, lives unshattered. I sat on a bench, let it all settle. In my pocket was the card from my mother, the one she'd given back to me after all these years. "I love you," crossed out. "Stay strong," rewritten. I pulled out a notebook from my coat, the same one I'd carried through every pitch, every deal, every sleepless week, building what they now claimed I'd tried to destroy. On a fresh page, I wrote, "I never wanted revenge. I wanted acknowledgement." I stared at it. The line wavered slightly from the wind, or maybe my hand. Then, slowly, I ripped the page out, folded it, lit a match from the emergency kit the hotel provided, watched the paper curl into ash inside the glass ashtray on the balcony ledge. No more explanations. No more hoping they'd see me, understand, remember. "They don't get that version of me anymore," I said aloud. And the wind carried the last pieces of the page down into the river below. There's a silence that comes after a storm, not peace, not relief, just stillness. The kind that lets you measure how much damage was done. That's the quiet I carried with me into Soho, 2 days later. I didn't use my real name when booking the conference space. I resurrected the old consulting firm I'd started in my 20s, back when I believed I could help companies do better without being swallowed whole. Vaughan Strategies. It sounded distant enough from the drama unfolding across headlines and inboxes, but familiar enough to draw attention. The room I chose was on the 8th floor of a private building tucked between a Pilates studio and a boutique wine shop. Glass walls, warm lighting, circular layout. It didn't scream courtroom, but it didn't whisper apology either. At every seat, a thick white envelope. No logo. Just 3 words in black serif font. Historical clarification packet. They arrived slowly at first. A retired board member I hadn't spoken to in years. A reporter from a legacy business column who once wrote a glowing piece about Zurin's founding. An angel investor who had quietly backed me during our first seed round. By 10:05 a.m., every chair was filled. I stood at the front, hands resting on the table, not on a podium. I didn't wear a suit, just a shirt and blazer. No tie, no performance, no mask. "Thank you for coming," I began. "I won't take more than 40 minutes of your time, and I won't ask for your sympathy, just your attention and your memory." I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. A scanned copy of the original co-ownership agreement filed with the state 10 years ago. My name, my signature, my code. "This is the foundation," I said, voice even. "This algorithm, the one Zurin Holdings built its platform around, was created at 3:12 a.m. on a Tuesday night in a sublet office downtown. I was the only person in the room." A few heads tilted, eyebrows lifted. I clicked again. Up came metadata logs, timestamps, server signatures. Then came the altered documents. The attempt to backdate a revision that removed me from IP attribution, filed 6 months ago, just before the merger proposal was announced. "Money can erase a lot," I continued. "But digital footprints have a nasty way of surviving. And forgery, even elegant forgery, still has fingerprints." I watched the eyes in the room. Some narrowed. Some darted toward their phones. The third slide was a bomb. A video. Adric's voice came first, grainy but unmistakable. "Once the deal closes, we phase him out entirely. He's sentimental, not strategic." Then Lyra. "By then, we'll be too big for him to touch us." The recording stopped. I didn't say anything right away. I just let the silence do what it does best. Force people to sit in the truth. Someone dropped a pen. One of the former CFOs, the one who'd been loyal to my father, pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through public filings. I knew what he'd find. My name still listed on patent protections leveraged in the merger's valuation pitch deck. No amount of spin could scrub that without invoking SEC interest. One of the investors stood up, didn't speak, just walked out. The journalist opened her envelope and began flipping through the pages, nodding slowly to herself. I finally spoke again. I didn't call this meeting to sue anyone or embarrass anyone. I called it because legacy matters, and not the kind written in headlines, but the kind written in silence, in omission, in decisions made behind closed doors. I looked up. You don't have to destroy someone to succeed, but thank you for teaching me what happens when you try. No one clapped. They weren't supposed to. I shut down the slideshow, collected my bag, walked out. The elevator ride down was quiet, save for the humming of the cables. I didn't feel light or victorious. I just felt clear. Back on the street, the noise of the city wrapped around me again. Taxis, shouting baristas, a mother scolding her toddler for stepping in a puddle. I pulled out my phone to call a car. Then it buzzed in my hand. A message from Lyra. You won, but you still lost me. I stared at the screen. The words sat there like a dare, like an invitation to feel something. I didn't. Not anymore. I deleted the message, didn't even watch it disappear. I didn't hear from Lyra again after that text. Not the next morning, not the day after. Instead, I heard my own breath again. Quiet, measured, mine. A week passed. I rented a modest co-working space not far from Prospect Park. Nothing fancy. Just a desk, some light, a second-hand office chair that squeaked if I leaned too far back. The windows overlooked a narrow street with a fruit cart that parked there every morning at 8. Predictable. Steady. That was enough for me. I wasn't trying to rebuild anything. Not a new empire. Not a second legacy. I just needed to work with clean hands. Consult on projects that didn't require me to flinch every time someone mentioned strategy or scale. One morning, I stared at a single sheet of paper on my desk. Simple letterhead, one sentence printed in dark blue ink. Zurin Holdings, no longer authorized for partnership. That alone wouldn't bring down the walls they'd built. But it was something. A marker. A boundary. There was a knock on my door that afternoon. The building didn't have a receptionist. I opened it myself. It was the courier. He handed me a small envelope. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was my mother's. Neat, slanted. The kind of penmanship only Catholic school nuns and 1950s secretaries ever had. Inside was a short note. I was wrong to be quiet. You didn't imagine what they did. You carried us all. Love, Mom. Underneath it, folded once more, was the birthday card. The same one. Same soft paper, slightly bent in one corner. But now, added beneath her original words, in her newest handwriting, one final line, "You are the legacy." I sat with that for a while. Didn't move, didn't smile, just let it soak into the cracks the last few years had left. Later that week, Vera showed up. I hadn't expected her. She walked into the office wearing a blazer too big for her shoulders and that same focused look she'd worn in the cab that day. In her hand was a manila envelope. "I'm not here for money," she said before I could say anything. "I know," I replied. "I got the deposit," she added quietly. "I figured it was you. I just wanted to make right what was done to you." She nodded once, then handed me the envelope. Inside was a still image, printed on glossy photo paper. A grainy freeze frame of the dash cam. Lyra in the back seat, her hand on someone else's chest. The moment it all began to shift. "You might want to remember who you were before they rewrote you," Vera said. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. She told me she was starting her own transport company, small fleet, better treatment for drivers, better eyes on management. Nothing fancy, she said. I offered quiet mentorship. I meant it. When she left, the room felt fuller somehow. A week later, I received an email from a legal firm I recognized, one of Adric's favorites, polished, neutral language. They were offering an acknowledgement to add my name publicly to certain patent filings and internal communications. In exchange, they wanted non-disclosure, cessation of all public statements, and a guarantee I wouldn't pursue legal action. I didn't need to think long. I took out a pen, wrote a single sentence on a blank card, sealed it in an envelope, and had it delivered by hand. Your silence taught me how to speak. Nothing else. A few days later, I took a walk through Harlem. It was a Saturday. The sun was out. A community tech fair had taken over a small plaza. Tents, laptops, a few stages made of plywood. Nothing corporate, just raw energy. I watched a teenage girl pitch an app she'd coded herself. Voice shaking, screen flickering. Proud as hell. She wore a t-shirt with white block letters. Build what they can't take from you. 12 years ago, I'd scribbled that on a sticky note and taped it to the inside of a server rack during a late-night coding sprint. I hadn't seen those words in a decade. Somehow, they'd made it into the world without me. That was enough. I ducked into a nearby cafe afterward, ordered a plain coffee, sat at a small table by the window, pulled a napkin toward me and wrote one word. Legacy. I stared at it for a while. Then I set my cup down on top of it, let the word disappear beneath the weight of the mug. And when I stood up, I didn't take it with me. I left it there, didn't look back.